Tēnā koutou whānau. This video is recorded on the 20th of June 2022, and today I would like to share with you the information that I have regarding Nan's father, James BORELL, seen here in his First World War uniform. James BORELL was born on the 21st of March 1896 in Te Puna. And he was given the name James, and he did not have a middle name. The notation "not present" indicates that the infant James was not present at the registry when this birth information was recorded. He was described as male, and his father's details are given here. Frank BORELL, a farmer, aged 40, from Rangiaowhia in the Waikato. James's mother was Selina BORELL, whose maiden name was Faulkner. She was 27 years of age, also from Te Puna. Frank and Selina, or Terina, were married on the 24th of December 1887 at Te Puna. And here we can see the informant's details. The informant is the person who provided this information to Births, Deaths and Marriages. And we can see that it was James's father, Frank BORELL. And there's his signature. And Frank was from Te Puna. And this was recorded or registered on the 31st of March 1896. And there we can see the registrar's details. The First World War raged from 1914 to 1918. And James joined up and was a member of the 22nd Reinforcements of the Māori contingent that was sent to replace the casualties endured by the Māori Pioneer Battalion on the Western Front. James did not enlist under his own name. He enlisted under the name Tere Howard. I'm told that he used a false name because his father Frank did not approve of him going to war. And James, or Tere's, service number was 19990. And Tere Howard was, before joining up, a labourer. And he gave his father's name as Frank Howard from Tauranga. I do wonder that if James had been killed on the Western Front, just how difficult it would have been for the New Zealand government to notify his next of kin, his father Frank, because after all his name wasn't Frank Howard, it was Frank BORELL, and he was from Te Puna, not Tauranga. Luckily, James came back from the war in one piece. Here we can see information from the Auckland War Memorial online cenotaph database. We can see here his record with the Auckland War Memorial is under the name Tere Howard. And we can see here Tere Howard, his name, and a notation also known as James BORELL. The name James BORELL was added to this information after I contacted the Auckland War Memorial and told them what his real name was. So prior to that, the New Zealand government military information only listed him under the name Tere Howard. And I am quite pleased to see that his information is now correct. Again, we can see his service number, 19990. And we can see his next of kin when he left was listed as Frank Howard from Tauranga. On this document, however, is some particularly interesting information that is not found elsewhere. We can see his embarkation details. As I've said previously, the First World War was from 1914 to 1918, and we can see here that James left New Zealand on the 13th of October 1917 and arrived on the 8th of December 1917 at Merseyside, Liverpool in London. He travelled to Liverpool on Her Majesty's New Zealand Transport number 93, and this vessel was the SS Corinthic. And here again we can see his information. He was a private in the 22nd Reinforcements of the Māori contingent. Here we can see the SS Corinthic. The Corinthic was a passenger liner that travelled between England and New Zealand. And at the outbreak of the First World War, she was pressed into service as a troop transport. However, even though she was transporting troops from New Zealand to England, the top two passenger decks were reserved for passengers, and all the troops on board were relegated down to third class at the bottom of the ship. So I do wonder just how wonderful a voyage the troops would have had, all living in the bottom of the ship for a period of a couple of months. It probably wasn't quite what they had imagined going to war would be like. Here we can see a photograph of the top deck of SS Corinthic in the year 1917, the same year that James travelled to Liverpool. And it would appear that many of the people in this photograph are wearing military uniforms. Is it possible, I wonder, that somewhere in this crowd of people is our Nan's father, James BORELL, off to war? That's a question we'll never know the answer to. James survived the war and returned to New Zealand, and he went on to marry his first cousin, Lucy, otherwise known as Tawharangi Tangitu, and we've discussed this in a previous video. And here they are, the two of them together. James and Tawharangi were married in 1920, and their marriage was registered in the district of Tauranga. They were married on the 15th of December 1920 at the Registrar's office in Tauranga. And here we see their names, James BORELL and Lucy Tangitu. James gave his age as 23, and Tawharangi gave her age as 20. James said he was a farmer, and Tawharangi was a domestic. James was unmarried, he was a bachelor, and Tawharangi was also unmarried, she was a spinster. And they both said they were born in Te Puna. They gave their usual residence as Te Puna and their present residence as Te Puna. James gave his father's name as Frank BORELL, a farmer, and Tawharangi gave her father's name as Portawa Tangitu, also a farmer. James gave his mother's name as Selina BORELL, maiden name Faulkner. And of course, Selina's Māori name was Terina. And Tawharangi gave her mother's name as Elizabeth Tangitu, maiden name Faulkner, and we know that she used the name Riapeti. And here we can see James and his parents. James's father was Werehiko Te Rongatoa BORELL, and his European name was Frank. The name BORELL is a French name, and likewise the name Werehiko is the Māori version of the name Francois. Hence, he went by the name Frank, which is a derivative of Francois. And likewise we can see here Terina Faulkner. James and Tawharangi had 5 children. The firstborn child was a daughter, Matilda Phyllis BORELL. Their second was a daughter also, and that was our Nan, Jacqueline Beverly BORELL, and I am told that Nan's nickname was Twinkie. The third child was another daughter, Adelaide BORELL, and she was known as Betty. During my research, I was initially under the impression that her name was Adelaide, but her birth certificate shows that it is in fact Adelaide. The fourth child, another daughter, was Patricia BORELL, and the last child of the family was their only son, Dwayne BORELL, who was known as Dooney. And that completed James's children. James BORELL passed away on the 17th of February 1964 at Tangitu Road, Te Puna, which is where he lived. We can see here his name, James BORELL, and his occupation was a Ministry of Works employee in Tangitu Road, Te Puna. At his death he was described as male, aged 67. His cause of death was bronchopneumonia over a period of weeks, coupled with carcinoma of the lung, in other words, lung cancer, over a period of months. And the attendant at his death was R.A. Fairgrey, who last saw James on the 3rd of February 1964, which was 2 weeks before he died. James's father was recorded as Frank BORELL, a builder, and his mother was recorded as Terina BORELL, maiden name Faulkner. James was buried on the 19th of February 1964 in Te Puna. And his death certificate states that he was born in Te Puna and lived in New Zealand for his entire life of 67 years. It also states he was married in Te Puna at the age of 24 to Lucy Tangitu, who at the time of his death was still alive, aged 65. At the time of his death, James had one son, Dooney, living, aged 25, and 3 of his daughters were still living, aged 40, 38 and 29. As with documents of the time, when he died, the government insisted that his degree of Māori blood was recorded on his death certificate. And we can see here at the top, his father's bloodline is considered to be 3/4 Māori from Ngāti Ranginui, and his mother's bloodline half Māori, also from Ngāti Ranginui. And the person who was in charge of the burial in Te Puna was James's brother-in-law, Ike Tangitu. That's Tawharangi's younger brother. And this death was recorded on the 21st of February 1964, and we can see there the registrar's signature. James was buried with his wife Tawharangi, who died later, at Epeha Urupa at Tutaranga Marae in Te Puna. And here we can see James's headstone at Epeha and the information that's recorded on it. They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. Whānau, thank you for watching this video. I hope you found the information interesting, and hopefully it's given you an insight into who Nan's father, James BORELL, was. Obviously, our aunties and uncles will have known James, and I would personally be quite interested to hear any stories they may have about him. Thank you for watching the video. Like and subscribe, you know the drill. And if you have any particular video you want made, please let me know in the comments and I'll see what I can do for you. Take care. Aroha nui ahau, kia koutou whānau. Ka kite anō.